Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Hello, Jonathan and audience.
Greetings, Slava and audience, our adventurers, our book friends. You know what I realized this week is I don't know of a lot of other podcasts that are multi-genre, and we talked about this during the week.
Right.
It seems like a lot of podcasts that I have looked at, because for anyone who has ever tried to grow something creative, it's good to know who your competition is, even if you're not like a business. Who your competition is would be anyone else who's also vying for the attention of the people who would listen to your thing, in this instance, podcast. And a lot of other ones that we've checked out have been Stormlight specific or Cosmere specific, which I love. But, that's going to talk all things Cosmere. I just don't know of a lot of other podcasts that do multi-genre.
No, I don't either, because we've done research, at least I have, preparing for this podcast and me trying to pivot the way we host and looking at other people's podcast and how they do with their methodology. I always come back to the podcast with Dean from LSG Media, because he has numerous podcasts. He has one for movies, one for games, I think one for a book, one for some TV shows, if I'm not mistaken. So we've looked at that, and then we've looked at the broader kind of horizon of podcasts. What I found is a lot of podcasts focus on an author or a genre or a series, like you said, Brandon Sanderson stuff. And we've taken a lot of cues from the LSG folks under my pressure of Jonathan, because I feel they do multimedia well, because they had an X-Files podcast. That's the TV podcast that I mentioned that was specific to X-Files. Then they also had a Star Trek one. They have a podcast that covers movies from A to Z, all sorts. And each one requires a different approach. And in my opinion, I think they do a fine job with all three. But to answer your question more directly, no, there's not a lot of multi-genre podcasts out there. Proud of that. We're new, very new, but I think being a year into it and approaching 100 episodes here in a few months, I think we're doing pretty well. I think we stand out. We should stand out.
It's just interesting to me that nobody else is doing multi-genre. Look, if you're listening to this and you know of some, drop them in the comments. We would love to take a look at those.
And by comments, we mean Instagram. Go to Instagram and chat with us there. That's where you can chat with us right now. Spotify won't allow comments because we're not hosting with them anymore.
Mm-hmm. Good call out. Good call out. As I've been thinking about this, though, I am realizing that SideQuest is almost a bit of a book club, a very casual book club you can dive into and step away from at your leisure, which is kind of fun, because then you don't have to feel like you have to do every book and stay with the group for the entire time, and you just pop in for your favorites.
Because it's the casual book club, like you said, it's so much easier for the audience to pop in and out or stay for the duration of a book, a series, a year, a season, whatever happens to be going on SideQuest. That's what makes it digestible. Because I love Stephen King, and I love the guy who runs the Stephen King cast. I'll listen to it here and there, but this is not to at all say anything about the content, because the content's great, but there's only so much you can take of 17 Stephen King books in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people will listen to it, and God bless him, and good for him if he has that audience. But for me, I listened to maybe 10 of them, but it was very sporadic because I wanted to get his thoughts on it, and he had some very interesting ones, and we brought those in. I brought those in some of my talking points to our coverage of it. So that's it. We're awesome, and we stand out. and people should listen to us more. That's I kid, but
That's funny. But we do want to hear from you. If there's books you want us to read, if there are topics you saw in books that we missed, head over to Instagram, drop us a comment, let us know. But let's dive into the second half of Dynasty of Evil. And before we do, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a side quest.
Right. So, for those who don't know, Dynasty of Evil is the third book in the trilogy by Drew Karpyshyn, and we find ourselves 20 years in the future with Darth Bane. He is the reigning Dark Lord of the Sith. He has demolished the Sith. He's taken on an apprentice, and he revitalized an old philosophy, the rule of two. So the Sith can only be two. One to wield the power and pass on the wisdom, and one apprentice to learn, challenge, and ultimately usurp the Dark Lord in a duel to the death. So one to possess the power and one to yearn for it, is the way it was first presented. And in this book, Darth Bane is now questioning Xana and her allegiance to him and whether she's worthy of becoming a Sith Lord. He starts to prepare for her downfall by looking for a holocron that's supposed to give you the ability of eternal life, the power of eternal life. You can take over bodies. And this is where we find ourselves in the second part, where Xana is chasing Bane because Bane has been kidnapped. She believes Bane is trying to set her up, so she gets herself an apprentice. We find a lot of interesting connections. I love these sort of things in the book, where there's a princess, Sarah. She's actually the girl of the healer who Bane threatened to boil the daughter in order for him to get cured by the healer. Then the princess has a bodyguard who actually knows Bane from their days when they were just regular people fighting on the dark side. So all these things are woven through this book and this second part of the book, and I think Karpyshyn did a wonderful job. There's particularly three people that meet in this second part of the book that know each other. It's not cliche, it's not overdone, and it makes for a suspenseful story, I think. So imagine a princess who ran away from home. She's a princess by marriage. So a girl who ran away from home because of Bane marries into a royal family, becomes a widow, gets a bodyguard who actually served with Bane back in the army. And then all three of them meet. And then you have to figure out, well, who's aligned with who? Because the princess is trying to kill Bane because for revenge. Bane is doing Bane stuff. And the one who's supposed to protect the princess, her bodyguard, ends up, spoiler alert, helping Bane. And how those plot points like come together and meet, and the everything that unfolds because of it. I thought Karpyshyn did a really good job with it.
I agree.
Excellent. Well, let me continue.
That's the podcast, folks. Yeah, this is not my favorite from the trilogy. I think that the first book is still my favorite because we see more character development, and we've talked about this in a previous episode as well. That character development doesn't have to be positive, but it should be there, whether the person gets better or worse. And in some instances, Bane does get worse, which is his goal. But book 2 is my least favorite of the series because it feels like Bane doesn't exist in the book at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's just him collecting toys. This one, he feels back to sort of in the middle ground between book 1 of like trying to achieve what he wanted and then also collecting toys again because he needs them for whatever. So this is my second favorite book of the trilogy. Still really like the overarching narrative, but really believe that Xana took over from book 2 to book 3 as the kind of the main character.
In more ways than one.
Yes. Well, we'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
Matt said he has a lot to share on that too.
So do I.
So Matt will be here next episode to discuss the Bane Trilogy and the ending of the Bane Trilogy here. So So do you, huh?
So do I. Because you know me, Detective Slava Holmes, I deciphered the ending. But I'll save it for later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's move through some of the plot points. These will go in rough chapter order, but not necessarily chapter by chapter. And yeah.
Let's get into it. So, question for you, Jonathan. Was it believable for you, like as you were reading this, that Bane got so easily captured? Or maybe it wasn't that easy because he took a lot of the team out. But eventually he gets captured by what's her face, the Huntress.
That's a great question. Upon initially reading it, I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought about it for 15 seconds, and I wondered, why would he put himself in this situation? Now, I realize he was returning home. Some people might be like, well, he was just going home. But he's supposed to be the most powerful Sith Lord in the entire galaxy right now. I think the element that I feel like should be addressed prior to this moment is some sort of new cloaking device or the Huntress's sorcery to be so powerful that she can shield them from being noticed. Something to like say, hey, he doesn't know they're there. Yes, he's weak. Fine with that part. But I also am surprised that he doesn't have an escape plan of some kind. I know that he's, attack things full force sort of character, but I don't know. I feel like throughout his years, he should have developed contingency plans to give him the upper hand again in some way, like hiding weapons around or like something, right? Like,
I was reading it and I'm like, this is not going to work. He's going to kill all of them and then go find the princess and bash her head in or something, Bane-like. And then he gets overtaken by the Huntress, which in hindsight, I suppose is a bit of a foreshadow that Bane is weakening more than even what you just mentioned. Like, oh, he's weak. This is like a stake in the ground, for lack of a better term, that Karpyshyn puts. Because this is where Bane's downfall begins, and it's really quick. By then, the book is like 2/3 in, I think.
Yeah.
The Huntress is now set up as somebody who can go toe-to-toe with Bane. And Xana, by then the book, bests Bane. So, and then, spoiler alert, everybody, the Huntress is the apprentice to Darth Xana. So maybe it's a setup by Karpyshyn saying, like, this is where Bane is over the hill, figuratively speaking, obviously. This is where his downfall begins. But having said that, as I was reading it, I was like, really, Bane? Dark Lord of the Sith? This is what happens? I didn't go all the way there because he does take a lot of them out despite being weak. And it's only the Huntress that bests him with the poison.
Right.
Like, it starts putting him to sleep. And then the concussion grenades are thrown in and he's knocked out. And no obelisk, so concussion grenades do what they do. So it's believable, but
it's on the line.
It's on the line. Thank you. Yes, it's on the line. And what gets me over that line is Karpyshyn probably setting this up for Bane's downfall at the end of the book.
Yeah, but I feel like he could have used something he's already set up, though, which is the hand tremor. So maybe Bane goes in for a swing and his hand cripples up because of the tremor. Like something more like that where he, because I hear you. I understand that he's setting him up where he's lost some power and he's grown weaker. I'm good with that. That makes sense. His desire to find this new holocron to try to create immortality, which I think happened at the end of the book. But the hand crippling or something like that, where it's like he's decaying, maybe his mind fogs out before the poison because of the hand decay and it distracts, whatever it is. That would have felt like the sauce that goes on the steak at a very fancy restaurant that's like some special Brazilian sauce from the Aztecs or something. I don't know, right? Like not Brazilian and Aztecs, but you know what I mean, where it would have been the piece that really makes the meal.
Like a nice chimichurri sauce.
Yeah.
Because if you had to put American steak sauce on a steak, order chicken. A steak should be succulent by itself.
True. It's still a good book. I like it. It's still flash fiction. This is not the level of critique, and maybe we need to come up with a rating system for my critiques where I just want the best possible story always. I just always want the best possible story, and I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna say it. I don't think everybody else does. I think a lot of people are comfortable with entertainment that's drivel, and then they recommend it to other people. Oh my god, you got to go see this movie. Da, da, da. And you watch it and you go, it's okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I gave it 2.5 hours of my time. Watch a movie or something. And it's worse if it's a book because you're spending hours on this.
I think there's two things at play here. One, people just like dribble. They are easily amused. They're the Roman crowds at the Colosseum. Just give me bread and a lion eating somebody's head off. And they haven't been exposed to a lot or don't want to be exposed to a lot, which brings us back to point number one. And what they think is great, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. For point number two, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They just haven't been exposed to a lot of books, a lot of stories. They're definitely, let's just say, not like us. And that's not to elevate us over them. But we're book nerds. We read a lot. We watch a lot of movies. We have other creative outlets. You actually made movies. I was adjacent to that world because of my brother, and I love movies and movie theory, film theory. So we look at the world through a different freaking set of glasses. But let's say your average person out there, I don't think, whether through laziness or ignorance, I don't think they're exposed to a lot of good content, good creative content. They might go to a museum once in a while. They'll read a book or a comic book. They'll watch a movie that's like a popular, blockbuster. And, well, let's use this as an example. Jurassic Park. Silly movie, but great movie, whatever. It's not celluloid gold or anything like that. It's just a movie. The book is a popular fiction, but there's a lot of more interesting things that Crichton, even though he's a popular writer, a lot more interesting elements in the book and themes that he pulls out about humans screwing around with stuff that they shouldn't. But your average person, even if you read the book and watched the movie, he's not going to walk away with, oh, wow, humans who mess around with technology that they don't understand ultimately bring about their own downfall in some way.
Man's hubris.
They're not going to think about it. That dinosaurs eating a shiesty lawyer who's a sniveler hiding in a porta potty. That's fun. And I think that's fun too. And this is not to denigrate those folks, but in the best case scenario, it's an issue of exposure.
Well, to your point, I think I'm coming to a realization here is taste.
Okay.
Not everybody cares.
Right.
Look, some people want to dump A1 sauce on every steak that they taste, even if it's $1,000 steak. And that insults you because you're a culinary artist.
Right. Yes.
But
yes,
maybe they are from middle America and they are a redneck. I can say that. I got family who's redneck. And I'm a grafted in tree from that side of the lake. So some people just do that. They do. And taste is, if we had a podcast on philosophy, taste as an aesthetic and the discussion on what is true art, high art, low art, man, that's a whole different, we won't go down that road, but I think to discredit us a little bit, if I can do that, is our tastes are different. You hear me you hassle me on this, right? Every time. You just want more. I do want more. I always want more. I'm like, not Thanos. You're not there yet. I'm going to say this, though. I'm like Lyndon from Cradle.
Okay.
I want more. I'm hungry.
More appendages?
I'm hungry. That's on the right lines. Anyone who's read the Cradle series will understand what I'm talking about. I'm hungry. I want more.
Well, I think there's an old Russian adage that says, I might butcher it, but I'm going to say it and then translate it. На вкус и цвет товарищей нет. And roughly translated is, for taste and preferences, there are no friends. That's a rough translation. There's actually probably a Western or an English equivalent of that. But yeah, like you and I have vastly different tastes in some areas of life and vastly different outlooks. And that's okay. We're still friends. So, yes, you can discredit us a little bit by saying, the aesthetics and taste, there's this whole side of philosophy that deals with this, and it's a lot more complex than what we have just discussed. But
Yeah.
this is not even a coin. This is a multifaceted cube, I think. But there's also
Tesseract?
something. Yes. Very good. There is objectively bad art, and Piss Christ would be something more than just because I'm a Christian and my sensibilities are
Can you
vinkled.
pause for a second and tell me what that is? I'm not familiar.
So
And the
I
audience
forget
probably.
exactly when this happened. I think it was early 90s. I don't remember the artist's name, but there was an artist who put a crucifix in a jar, pissed in it, and it was displayed at an art museum as Piss Christ. Now, whatever the artist is trying to say about Christianity, about Jesus Christ, about art in general, whatever he's trying to express, that's in his head. This is 20 years ago when this story hit the news. I was young and I didn't pay attention enough. But
1987.
Okay, so even earlier than the 90s. My point is, it doesn't matter that there was a cross in the piss. Put in a Star of David. Put in some kind of Islamic artifact or amulet or whatever, art piece. Put in
Hare Krishna beads, whatever.
Whatever. I don't care. Put a tampon in it. Like, put a pen in it. But an object, whatever that object is, sitting in piss, that's just degeneracy. That's not art, objectively speaking. Maybe somebody in the audience will now clutch their proverbial pearls and faint, or call us narrow-minded and, fight me. Anything in piss, sitting somewhere displayed, is not art. Now, modern art and some of the more weirder kind of avant-garde, off the beaten path stuff that maybe somebody who's a classically trained would be like, that's just squares on a white plane. That's not really art. I'm more liberal in those kind of senses. So I'm like, yeah, maybe it's not art in the classical sense, but whatever. Live and let live.
Like Rothko.
Yeah.
Single line of red down a white canvas.
See, I love that kind of stuff. I'd hang that in my house. I am very okay with that kind of art. Again, fight me if you really hate that kind of stuff.
Well, I think
too bad for you.
I really think that's why there's categories of art. The Piss Christ thing, I had never heard of that before. I just wasn't watching the news when I was yet young, or the history. But there was a short story we read in college called Nipple Jesus, and it's similar, right? So somebody took a bunch of Polaroids and built a full image of Christ in the way that we see him depicted in like paintings and things. And it was all nipples. And then what they did is they put a recorder on it, a video recorder of people coming into a closed booth, almost like a confessional, and then looking at people, looking at the art. And the artist pieced in this short story is actually the recording of people looking at the art, not the art itself, but using the medium to create a reaction and emotion from people. And it's this piece like looking at religion and art and like breasts and these things of like, is it okay to do these things? So that's basically what you were saying, where it's like, is the medium in which you use to make art. Now it's a little different because the human body versus like actually the excrement from the human body is a little different, right? But it's the same premise of like taking things that society deems unclean and using them to create art. But I think that's like categorical. I would agree. I think objectively it's not good art, regardless of the religious icons. But there's a large slew of unique people who are into that type of art. So yeah, anyway, this is going down the philosophical aesthetics that I said we weren't going to do. Let's veer back toward Lucia and Drew Karpyshyn and good pop fiction from the master Star Warian Drew Karpyshyn,
the spoon feeder Drew Karpyshyn.
Look, I made a comment to Slava. I said Drew is great at spoon feeding us the story. And that's not a slight against him.
No.
Look,
no.
I want so you hear me badger about wanting more in stories, but Drew does a really good job of making me not have to think, because if you can't tell, I think all the time about everything. Stories, entertainment, food. how I organize my clothing because I want it to be the most efficient possible. And Drew lets me take a break from myself. And so he spoon feeds me this story. It's like he's sitting in front of me and he's giving me spoonfuls of Galaxy Milk and Star
Dark Side
Wars
cereal.
Dark Side cereal. Yes. And I'm okay with it. It was really meant as a compliment, although I could see when you read it, it's like he's spoon feeding me a story.
I knew you were being complimentary. I think he does do a good job of spelling out why characters do what they do, their wants and desires. And we've talked about story element on this podcast often. And one of the central ideas behind what is a good story is person A wants something from person B, or person A wants to go to place D over there, whatever the hell it is. If you don't know why people are doing what they're doing in the book, like in The Head Full of Ghosts, what the hell's going on? Nobody has any sort of idea. As the reader, you don't have any idea of what's going on and why people are doing what they're doing in this book. Here, you know exactly. And more so than just Princess Sarah wants to get her revenge, which is good enough. That's a good enough plot point. But Princess Sarah wants to get an revenge on Darth Bane, who tortured her, kind of tortured her, scared her as a kid, held her over some boiling water, and made her dad heal him. And then she had to run away from home. She loved her dad, and she didn't want to leave him. And then she believes that he killed her dad, which was actually Xana. And there's this complex story building, and you understand exactly why somebody who's inexperienced and always in a run, and then finds some solace in a royal family, and then becomes a widow, and then tries to use her power as the princess to find Bane and kill him. You understand all those things, and you understand why it all falls apart and blows up in the princess's face, literally and figuratively. So that's the spoon feeding, I think, that you're talking about, Jonathan, and correct me if I'm wrong. It's incremental when it needs to pick up and the action needs to ramp up. It's good, and then it comes down a little bit, and he continues to tell the story. And then Lucia frees Bane. Boom. Action goes up. Then the princess in the control room, not understanding what she's doing, doubting herself, judging herself, deciding to blow up the place, then not blowing up the place, and finding Lucia's dead body, and then blowing up the place. All that, and I'm not doing it justice here by recounting it in just short bits like this. All that makes for a wonderful story. I think your term, although sometimes it's used negatively, I think your term is apt here. It's spoon-fed to us. Everything is laid out, and you understand why the characters are doing something.
Right. And being pop fiction, it's not supposed to be given the level of questions and critique that I tend to, we tend to bring to stories. For all the critiques, and I'm going to just undercut myself here, for all the critiques, like 100% recommend this series to anybody who enjoys a quick, well-paced, ups and downs journey trilogy, even though I didn't really like the second book from a character growth perspective. Great series, 100% recommend all the time. Like, Drew's work is just awesome. Real happy. I know we're going to dive into some more of him. Totally fine undercutting myself on this. But I really, I like what he does here, right? So he spells out why characters allow something. Just to your point, the princess thinks that she has the upper hand. And I want to get into this victim strength mentality here in a minute, victim villain thing in a second. But she questions what she's doing. And then before that, well, I guess I can bring these people with me because I don't have anything else to hide. I don't have any more secrets that I need to keep from my protector or my assassin that I hired. And we're seeing her thoughts in real time, from a story perspective, real time. We know why she's doing what she's doing, which then gives us a little bit of empathy to go, yeah, you're not really built out for the revenge thing, lady.
Right.
So I don't know why you're trying to do this. I understand that you think that this is going to solve your problem, and then Bane starts using her logic against her. Your actions prove the truth of what I believe, taking the pain and not responding. Like, that's cruel. you can be... I honestly would have liked more moments of Bane being captured or being in these, like, back-footed moments, and he's just berating the people who are, like, have the upper hand. This might be my favorite part in the series. Right here. It's so much fun because we don't see that in a lot of books these days, from my recollection, where someone in power is put on the back foot and they're still strong, right? Like that contrast right there. Oh, just really, just very appetizing, like the last bite of a nice steak from a Brazilian steakhouse or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm reminded of a movie. It has Mel Gibson in it, and he's like a criminal.
What Women Want.
Yes, yes. So there's this scene in What Women Want where Mel Gibson is tied to a chair in a basement and getting his toes hammered in with a mallet because people want information out of him. He gets like 2 toes hammered and broken, and then he gets asked the question again. And instead of answering, he goes, "This little pig you went to market." And so the guy cracks open another toe. And that's kind of what Bane is doing here. Though he's being injected with this serum that's supposedly causing him to convulse and undergo extreme pain. He's like, "Yep, screw you, princess. You are proving that my worldview is correct as you torture me.
Yeah.
Now go screw yourself." Pretty
So
much.
so Slava, while you're on this, let's open up victims and strength, right? Like, so Bane accuses the princess of being a victim still,
Mhm.
right? And we see Bane's strength in the midst of him being tortured, right? So what is it that makes someone a victim, and what is it that makes them strong? Because I think that although this is not the benchmark that I think we should use to determine these two things, I would say that it is a snapshot of an example of what it is to be a victim, regardless of your authority, notoriety, etc., and what it is to be strong. And there's probably a better word between victim. Like, what's the opposite of a victim? Like a hero, like in like real life, because I don't think that that's right either. What word am I looking for?
I don't think there's an opposite. Nothing comes to mind, at least. But I do think we have to have accurate definitions, well-articulated definitions. So you can be a victim of something, of a crime, of an assault, of abuse, a victim of fraud. You can be a victim. Now, that's one thing. The other part of this is the current conversation in, society, where victimhood mentality, where you don't rise above. So they say, the people who use this term, you don't rise above what happened to you, and you're constantly in this cyclone of self, pity, never being able to see past what has happened to you. So that's the conversation that kind of is happening in our society, and it has been happening since I was a kid. I've heard these terms all my life. So what do we mean by victim? Is the princess a victim? Not really. Things have happened to her that are bad. When she was a child, she was a victim of an assault. You can call it that because somebody held her over boiling water. So I think before we started the conversation, like, what do you and I mean by victim here? I think what we mean, and you tell me if I'm wrong, or I think what you mean is what's termed in our society, what's called victimhood mentality, where something happens to a person and they never let go, and their identity becomes a victim identity. They view everything and they live their lives in light of, not despite, but in light of this event when they became a victim or when they were victimized.
Yeah, I'd say that in the conversation, a victim would be someone who bad things happen to, and that marks, just like you said, their identity, and now they're living from and through that filter of like, well, I'm a person who blank. So princess, to
Yeah.
keep this story centric, I am a person whose father was killed by an evil man, and that's all that I am. And it's like, well,
Yep.
that did happen. Don't deny the truth. Don't deny it. Like, that did happen. But you also married into a royal family and saw this huge success. And although that there are things going on that don't make that easy, you could have, especially because this is a story about like galaxy-wide things going on, you could have rewritten your identity and been strong and not have to seek revenge. So by living through these marked moments of negativity, of evil that have happened to you, you're giving it more strength and choosing to be in your own prison by not processing it or addressing it and allowing it to still mark your life. So I'd say that that's a mostly clear definition of victimhood in this instance. Do you want to define strength for us as well?
Sure. One thing I'd like to add, though, is both the princess and Bane are victims. In their lives, they've experienced things that have harmed them, injured them, all the things that make a victim. But each one has chosen different paths, and Bane has overcome it. Now, where it gets muddy here, yes, Bane has overcome his father's abuse and his time in the mines and all the other stuff he went through the Sith Academy. He overcame that. And the reason he went to the Sith Academy is because he was trying to run away from the immediate context. If you remember, that he hit an officer in a bar and he was going to get executed or something. So, okay, we understand all that. And despite him turning to the dark side, which is, according to the rules of this book and this universe, is objectively bad, going to the Sith is objectively bad. But that's how Bane has overcome his victimhood, his victim mentality. He has overcome the things that have caused him harm and the things that he's experienced. And he is stronger because he has chosen to live on and grow and acquire power and knowledge, even though it's evil power and knowledge. He has chosen to live despite those things, where the princess, despite being the good person, despite being the good guy in this story, in this universe, she lives under the shadow of what has happened to her. She's constantly thinking about it. She's not able to move forward. And because her mind is clouded, her efforts and the revenge fall apart quickly and get her best friend killed, who I'm not that sad about dying because...
Right. She's not your favorite person in the world.
Okay, you rat bastard, because some guy was nice to you in the barracks 20 years ago, you're going to throw away your life? Just like the princess. So blinded by revenge, which is fine. Your dad was killed by these people. Yeah, I understand the impulse for revenge, but not thinking through anything, because the end goal is only revenge. Must get this guy in front of me. I know potions. I'm going to torture him with potions. And that's it. That's all that's happening. And Lucia, oh, Bane, the only Sith that never yelled at me and saved my life once 20 years ago. And despite him being an evil piece of shit, and the princess being the one who's actually been the kindest and the best person and best friend of Lucia, Lucia's like, no, but my heart yearns for those times in the barracks where Bane, I don't know, gave me an extra piece of bread. That didn't happen. I'm being, facetious and hyperbolic. That's the thing that makes you betray your princess and free Bane? Well, you deserve to be killed like a dog. So that's all I have to say. I think strength, well, first of all, I think the modern conversation about victimhood is very muddied by both sides screaming at each other. But at its core, for victims to get strength or become strong, they have to live outside of the event that has made them a victim, right? You can be a victim for a long time, and that will scar you, that will eat away at your mind, sometimes at your identity. For example, Tia, I forget her last name. I'm so bad with names. But Tia, she wrote a book, The Well-Trained Wife. It's not out yet. But she recounts her life in fundamentalism and how she had to escape. And from an early age, she was groomed to be a very obedient, submissive wife, never to question anything. And she married somebody who's super controlling. And there's a lot more to the story. But she was a victim, and for a long time a victim. And only until she realized, hey, if I don't get out of this, fine, I'll die like this. But I need to get out of it because of my kids. I don't want the next generation of kids to be my daughters to repeat my story and my sons to repeat what my husband is doing to us. So she escapes. Years later, through therapy, she realized what she needs to work on in order to move past all that abuse, because that will scar a person. Like people who've been raped, who've been assaulted in other ways, who've been molested by family members or beaten severely by their parents, or just had to live in a house where parents were unstable because of drug use or alcoholism. All that scars a person, causes a crippling in their growth. The way that Tia was able to get over that, air quotes over that term, was being able to understand who she is and what she went through so she can talk about her experiences. Yes, she's a victim of these things, but that doesn't define how she lives. It doesn't cloud her perspective on life. So I think that's the difference between perpetual victimhood and being a victim, but being somebody who has overcome horrible things that happen to you.
Mm-hmm. To emphasize the point, to pick another character that we've read, Kaladin at one point is a victim and then chooses to overcome in the midst of adversity. And this is actually the type of story that we love. It's the underdog story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I can't prove this, but I think that a lot of the underdog stories that we read that we really enjoy start off with characters a victim and they choose to overcome their adversity. And they move, and this is why I emphasize this a few times, and moving forward, I'm just going to spoil the rest of every episode that I'm on. I'm going to talk about character growth and whether or not there's enough in a book, because characters should move from point A to point B. Point B can be worse off than point A. That's fine. But they need to move.
And to your point with Kaladin, it takes him a while. He's a melancholy little...
He's got depression. It's proven. 4 books, 200 hours of audio, thousands of pages. Kaladin has depression, period.
Yeah, and that's what I want to emphasize. It's not that I'm saying just get over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, this is why I hate Instagram, hustle boy philosophy, even of the guy that you love, like David Goggins. When I saw an Instagram reel of him, going, what are you what are you doing? Are you depressed? You don't feel good? Something's got you down. Just go for a run. It's 4:00 in the morning and I'm running. Shut the up. I don't think anything that horrible was happening in his life. He was just a fat piece of shit and then decided to change. And he saw the potential as he changed from being a lazy piece of shit to somebody who wants to advance and achieve things. And he achieved great things. Fine. Good for you. You got your medal. You got your book. But there's some people who have literally been broken by others. Their psyche, their soul, their mental health has been eroded. Their identity as a human has been eroded so much that it will take them 20, 30 years to maybe finally live a fulfilling, normal life, what we would call strength, a strengthened life in this conversation. So the fact that Kaladin, it's taken him how many years in the cosmic universe to get over certain things and to finally take charge of Bridge 4 and stop just moseying around cliffs thinking about suicide. But those are real things. People do that. That's not just a silly joke about Kaladin. So each person that's a victim has their own journey. And some people, they're able to snap out of it because the truth is so stark, and just their character build up when they're faced with that truth. They snap out of it and they start making actions, start taking steps, taking action to change. There's some people that need to hit rock bottom, like Tia. She didn't leave her abusive relationship. Well, first of all, because she was groomed for it. Second of all, because she was used to it, I think. And third of all, she was scared. And her rock bottom, air quotes around that, was she didn't want her kids to repeat her life. And then, boom, she was doing it. And even then, it took her like 2 weeks to finally make the decision. And she tells the story in the interview where she knows that she's afraid her kids with her husband because her husband's mentally unstable and almost killed all of them. And she's like, okay, I'm going to leave on this date. Between her decision and that date, she left her kids alone with her husband for like a weekend as she did something because she doesn't want to disrupt their rhythm. Why did somebody do that? That's stupid. And she admits that's stupid, but that's somebody with a broken psyche. She just doesn't understand. She knows what to do, what she has to do, but she couldn't in that moment. She had to wait a couple of weeks before she actually ran away. And it was at the behest of a state-sponsored therapist or somebody was involved from the state, and they interviewed her husband because there was reconciliation issues or something. So I'm not doing this part of the story any justice. But something happened where the state had to get involved, and they interviewed the husband, and the guy called her and said, "Leave now. Just leave now. Take the kids and run." So after one interview, the guy saw that hubby was an insane person. But anyway, the point is, on my long rant here, is everybody's in a journey. Plenty of people in the world are victims of something because we just live in a broken world. And I don't want to turn this into the stuff I hate from the Instagram philosophers. To live despite what has happened to you is how you get strength, right? Like you asked that victim versus strength. It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to be Bane. You're not going to be Kaladin. You're not going to be Tia. Each story is going to be very different. So, and sometimes people live all their life with depression and brokenness because everybody's built differently too. Not everybody's me. Not everybody's you. We have our own stories and how we overcame the crap that's happened to us. They're very different. Like the way we approached our stuff, like both you and I approached it differently, and we still came out better on the other end. I don't think I'm a victim. Like I don't live my life as a victim of, child abuse, but it's happened to me,
So I agree with that. Those are some good thoughts. The only correction I have to offer is you were speaking in some ignorance about David Goggins and his story. He wasn't just fat. He had a heart condition, a learning condition, was called the N-word repeatedly growing up after he escaped his abusive father. And his father did try to kill him, his brother, and his mother. He did escape some of these things. So, because anyone who's read the book, like me, will listen to you and say, well, that's ignorant. And so I'm just letting you know publicly, like, you are missing some elements of the story, which is fine. You haven't read the books. Not a big deal. He did overcome quite a bit prior to just being fat.
Well, I appreciate that. That does put more context to the story and changes my mind about it. But when I watch him or anybody else on Instagram, like all those pseudo philosophical self-help nonsense, the hustle boys of Instagram or TikTok, it drives me up the wall.
Yeah, most of them are useless. Most of them have not been through anything. And I will agree with that 100%.
It's banal. Shut up. Even for Goggins. No, going for a run at 4 o'clock in the morning is not going to help me, or it's not going to help Tia. It's not going to help anybody else except you and maybe a few people who are like you who need that. So that I'll stand by because it's just fucking annoying listening to anybody.
Well, I'm going to counterpoint you on that one point, that not helping anybody. Everyone, and this is something you mentioned, you and I dealt with our adversity differently. And then let's get back in the book here. Everyone needs different tools to get out of their adversity because adversity is unique to all of us. Look, when I'm on the treadmill, sometimes I am quoting Kaladin because that's what I need to finish this run. And you did something different. You read Stephen King books and you found solace in that or strength or whatever. And Tia did something else to get herself and her kids out of her situation. Goggins had to create a second persona for himself to remove himself from that victim mindset. And then he started using it to build strength for himself. And now that's what he talks about. And so that's the thing that some niche group of people need to get out to say, hey, there's more to life than the adversity that happened to you. I would contradict your point there to say, even though it doesn't work for you and you find it annoying, which is fine, it does work for a group of people. And I don't think you'll contradict this point, but like it is beneficial for people to move from victimhood to strength, regardless of your unique flavor of adversity in life.
Absolutely.
Period. Even though it's annoying to you, which is great. That's fine. Whatever. I love it. I love that shit. It's great. It's not for you, and that's okay. I'm going to keep sending them to you.
Right. So here's the funny thing. Jonathan keeps sending me those kind of videos, and then I send him videos making fun of those videos. And I know I get his goat, maybe a little bit, and I do this with love. I don't do this at all with any malice or like, fuck you, Jonathan.
No.
But you see me sending him memes, and it's a heart react, laugh react, heart react, laugh react. No react to the satirical, video about some kind of inspirational video. Then heart react, laugh react, laugh react. I'm like, if you watch that, he just thinks I'm being a dick, and he doesn't want to give me the satisfaction of reacting to it.
Anytime I get the opportunity to not give him the satisfaction, I do. Well, not every time, but a majority time. That's funny.
Yeah.
Bring us back though. Bring us back to Star Wars. It was a fun side quest. I hope you guys found that useful for wherever you're at in life. you're not alone as kind of an uplifting moment to move before we move on. You're not alone if you are going through a difficult time. We support you. Get out of the bad situation, whatever you're in. But like, you're called to more. You get to do more in life, and whatever your story is today is not how it has to stay.
Right.
You should quote me on that. It's, rhymes and stuff.
There you go. So I think a perfect segue is talking about Lucia being conflicted with her past, because we talked about the princess victimhood and stuff. Now we have a person who does not feel like a victim at all. Lucia is a bodyguard in the royal guard. She is a former Sith soldier. She was in some kind of prison or mining prison, I think, or mining colony. Not a lot is given to us that would lead me to believe that it was so horrible for her that she would be a victim of something. Well, she was a soldier for the bad side, for the other side, and the Jedi put her in prison, and she was a prisoner of war. But nothing tells me that as a prisoner of war for the Jedi, she was abused. So her confliction there, whether to release Bane, to help Bane or not, to betray the princess or not, that seems like a conflict for somebody with a weak character, in my view. To me, this is where I started not to like her as a character. Now, I can see people raising their hands in the audience, perhaps, saying, but, the bonds that are created in boot camp, in the military, you don't understand that, Slava, because you've never served. Okay, but I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I can understand the brotherhood that is developed, but the way I'm built, my allegiance is not to some sentimental, ethereal kind of notion of brotherhood. If we're in a unit, yes, we're a team, we're brothers. But if one of you is a worthless piece of shit, and let's say I'm going to use something hyperbolic, and diddles kids, what are you going to defend him because you are part of a unit? Same thing here. Yeah, 20 years ago, you were in a shitty situation. And yes, out of all the other Siths, this Sith treated you better than the other Sith. I get it. I get the nostalgia, if that's the right word. I get the feelings that are probably bubbling up in Lucia. But now you're looking at him as the Sith Lord, and he's the embodiment of everything that was wrong and the other Sith that treated you like crap. He is now turned completely. And here you are going, but that one time when I remember when Denth, he was so nice to me. Here, I'm freeing you. I don't get, I understand that's a cool story, right? Like, I'm not saying Drew wrote a bad story. I'm talking in-world critique. What the hell's wrong with you, Lucia?
Yeah, it seemed convenient as a plot point. It's just kind of convenient, right? So I like that Lucia knew him. I like that Lucia had conflict from her past and her present, because that offers good character growth. But it did seem a little convenient for Bane, right?
Yeah, I see that. I didn't think about it that way, but now I see it. Yep.
So I don't hate it because it's flash fiction. It's pop fiction, right? But it did feel just a bit quaint. Like, oh, okay, all right. Because you're right. Like 20 years, is she remembering that her life was almost lost, and every day she really appreciates it? I feel like I got to find a new way to add this flavor, but I'm just going to say the same thing over again. I need a little more, and I'm sorry. I've got one sermon, I guess, here. It's I need a little more. That's it. Where she's thinking about how she is really grateful for still being alive. She made some mistakes with the Sith, like whatever. It doesn't even have to be mistakes. It's just that someone saved her life and she remembers that, and she's got a tattoo of it or something. Like, reinforce to me beforehand, just subtly. Hey, the princess is like, remind me about your tattoo again. Oh, it's da-da-da-da, whatever. I don't care what method you use for it, but because we don't have earlier on reinforced things, that's why it feels quaint, in my opinion, to keep this short. So that's Lucia, which is different from we haven't talked about him at all, and we're like nearing the end of the episode, is Set Hearth, Xana's apprentice.
I love him.
And this is not a great transition, but I've wanted to talk about him for a minute. I really like him, and I also hate him. He's
Yep.
that character, right?
Yep.
So what are some of your likes and dislikes of Sedharth and his Dark Jedi machinations, to use your word?
Well, I like the fact that he's a dark Jedi. So he's not a
Me
Sith,
too.
but the Jedi are, I find sometimes, and no Star Wars fans, I'm not insulting the canon or the stories as a whole. Sometimes I find what the Jedi say is just trite, pseudo
100%.
profundity, just trite pseudo profundity. So the Sith seem a little bit more like they have their crap together.
Honestly, though, the admin feels better on the Sith side, if I can say that.
Right. So that's not a knock on Star Wars world. It's just what I feel about the Jedi. But the Jedi is still the good guys, right? So you kind of want to root for them more than the evil umbrella corporation of the Sith.
Mm.
Seth Hart is a dark Jedi. He's that guy or character who has rebelled against his former life or the people that trained him, against his organization. Let's call it that. That's the best term I can come up with, because there's some things that he just can't swallow, and good, bad, or different. I'm not gonna make any attempts to make any moral comments about his character, but he is that rebel kind of on the outside where he doesn't want to do anything the way the Jedi do, but if he does that, he's on the out automatically. So he's like, all right, screw it. I'm just here. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to use my powers for my benefit. I want to party, drink, fly around and, rob people. I don't care. So he's that guy, which is always a fun character. Kind of a wild card. Can we say that? He's a wild card?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I really love a wild card because that gives the author so much play. He could have been the apprentice. He could have done something else. Maybe later, because he stole the holocron, he tries to give the Sith a run for their money. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the wild card as a plot point.
What stood out to me is each character is so different, right? Because we have Bane and Xana, two Siths, very different. We have Princess and Lucia and the Huntress, and none of them are just carbon copies of each other or carbon copies of some sort of trope. Each one is so unique. And then you have Hearth here, who is also unique. Yes, he's a character as easily identified as a wild card, as we have just established, but he has unique wants and desires, and the way he interacts with people is written well. It captures his character, like his rebellious character, well. Nothing seems cliche. To me, nothing seemed cliche. This is a bit of an awkward segue, but I think it works because we're talking about Drew's writing. So he writes characters well, and in flash fiction, everything has to move fast.
Yeah, pacing has to be good.
So I like your note here that Drew writes fight scenes well. They're fun. And they're captivating. You are interested in what happens next. They're written in 100%. A way that there's tension. You're compelled to keep reading.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good tension in the fight scenes.
Honestly, writing fight scenes is hard because I've tried. And it's like, and then they did this, and then you read it and you're like, what is this garbage that I just put on paper? It's like, it's as if you're shadowing, okay, and then he's going to do this. King writes this well too, where it's like suddenly blank. Even the suddenly stops you from being in the action a little bit. Not that King did this, but mixing two different moments here. Just having it go through and writing in present tense in such a way where you feel like you're present for it, because it's not, and then he threw a punch. It's his jaw hit the floor and he wasn't sure what happened. You're describing these moments, and it's almost like a bullet point outline where it's like boom, 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 boom. You can't write a fight scene the way that you write inner monologue or inner dialogue or going to the store to get milk. It's, oh, hey, he got on his red bicycle and he rode down the road and da-da-da-da. It's he woke up in the hospital because he got hit by a car because he didn't look both ways before he crossed the street, whatever it is, right? And now that's not a fight scene, so I'm doing my own argument, poor examples here, but
But listen, if
Yes.
there was a fight scene and somebody got kicked across this, since we're talking about fantastical world, somebody got kicked so hard they flew into a street and got hit by a flying car,
Mm-hmm.
That's fun.
It is.
But writing that, how do you write that without it going?
It's hard.
And then he was kicked, and a cart that was going on the street hit him, and he died.
Right.
Like
right.
that's not a
Deborah
fight
was
scene.
flying through to go get groceries for Tony to make pizzas tonight, and then suddenly she's in a car accident because there's a flying super. It's like, no, I don't need any of that information.
Yeah.
Cut it down to the bare bones and keep me interested. What did the person do? What were they thinking? He gives us inner thoughts in the middle of the fights. Bane's not sure if he can da-da-da. And it's just like, oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that does seem like Xana more in particular, I think, when she's in her fight scene, she's like, is he goading me? Is he going to stop me from doing whatever? You get the inner dialogue while they're in the fight scene, which I think is even another layer of being difficult.
Yeah, I was about to say this, yes.
2 points for Drew on this because it's just so hard to do. So the princess is a good example, right? Where to go back to something we talked about earlier, where she says, I don't have any other secrets to hide. I'll bring them with me. You know why she's bringing them with her now. So Drew is juggling the action that he wants the character to take with the inner dialogue and justification of why the character's doing that, where they're like, well, I don't have any more secrets to hide, so I'll bring them with me. And then you have Lucia, who's like, oh my gosh, this is, so-and-so from 20 years ago who saved my life. Am I going to betray the princess? I don't know. And even though we felt like it didn't have enough justification for 20 years of a time gap, we still get the struggle of the moment. And this is, getting away from the action scenes, but we get the struggle of the moment, and Drew finds a way to mix those together in action and inner dialogue at the same time, which that keeps me interested. And I'd say that's like one of the biggest strong points for enjoying this book for me.
As I was reading the fight scene between Xana and Darth in the prison, I was struck by how well Drew went from fight scene, inner thoughts, fight scene, inner thoughts, struggle, fight scene, inner thoughts. This is really good writing. And it would work in flat fiction. It would work in a 1,000-page Sanderson book. And Sanderson does the same thing with his fight scenes. I think they're well written.
Yeah.
That sort of fight scene writing, I don't find a lot of it around. Now, I've been exposed to at least 3 authors that do this stuff well, but I've also read more than Sanderson and King in my life. This doesn't happen a lot in books. From my foxhole, this is the next level of writing fight scenes.
Yeah. In terms of fight scenes, because I want to move this along and we should end this episode and also set up the next one, which I'm super excited about with Matt, is Drew requiring Bane to engage in his final battle at his weakest moment is a bold choice, and I like it a lot. Now, he doesn't have to finish that battle because he's in the prison, but like making Xana have to choose, is she going to escape and survive, or is she going to fight him now and take over? And then Bane, like when he's weak, and then making him again have to choose strength. Like that was really fun. And then they both escape and they get back to, it's not Tatooine, whatever the place is where the healer lived. I don't remember the name of the planet. And then saying, hey, all right, we're going to do our final battle here. Just blatantly going, Xana, here's a message. This is where I'm at. We're going to finish this now. Bane, in his authority, still picking the apprentice. Win or lose, this is the apprentice, right? Like, this is what's going to happen.
Ambria,
thank you. And I like it because it's kind of a cliffhanger here. We didn't talk about the final fight with Xana. We didn't talk about, Bane taking over Xana's body, more about the Huntress. We're going to save that for next time to dialogue with the resident Star Wars expert, Matt, who I'm always excited to bring on the podcast and can't wait to hear more about Star Wars and the galaxy that we have going on here. And also kind of like what happens afterward. I want to get some teasers on that because I know that we're going to dive into another Star Wars book. And frankly, I think I like the books better than the movies. Not the originals from like the 70s, because I think that those stand as a test of time, or stand against the test of time for what they were. But I'd say the newer stuff, I haven't even really watched. Like I watched a few things here and there, but these books are making it very appetizing to go dive into some more stuff. So,
well, fun note, I have read more Star Wars books than I watched movies too. And I have a friend, I'm actually standing up in his wedding in October. I know he's a Star Wars fan, and I've texted him a few Star Wars references to things, and he's like, wait a minute. I thought you said you'd never watched a movie before. It seems like you know a lot about this world without watching any of the movies. And I was like, well, I know a guy named Matt, and I read a bunch of Drew Karpyshyn stuff, and I've done hours upon hours of Sith sorcery.
Research. Yes, well, that too.
Research. Yeah. I mean,
Sith
research.
Sorcery. I mean, maybe you did. What do they do in the galaxy? They don't slaughter goats. That's like an Earth thing.
That's an Earth thing. I think they just slaughter people. Annoying people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But anyway, so it's fun to engage with him now on something that he's a big fan of, like Matt.
That's what I love about this podcast. I ran into somebody yesterday. I don't know this guy. He was on the street. He had the third book of the Stormlight Archives out on his table, just drinking a coffee. And I just talked to him and told him about the podcast. And people, no one told me this when I was growing up, or I think I would have read more, is the more books you read, the more opportunity you have to talk to people about literally anything. And it can be news and politics, it can be, Stormlight Archives, it can be Star Wars, but the more that you read, the more that you're able to make connections in between books, and then the more you're able to talk with more people about more things. And it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very happy that we went through this series, and I think you're right. We'll probably do a few more, if not Drew Karpyshyn books, more Star Wars books from this sliver of the world, right?
Right.
When you look up Drew Karpyshyn and this trilogy, the suggested books from the same printing house, I would imagine, come up. And it's different authors, but it's the same design, the same layout of the book cover. So I'm thinking this is just like a publishing house that specifically does these Star Wars books. So I'm looking forward into getting more of that, especially Revan.
Yeah.
Especially Revan. He's a very interesting character that I want to
I really think
learn
that's
more
the next book. I can't guarantee that, but that's my lean at the moment. We'll see what Matt says next time.
Sounds good. Well, Jonathan, I think that's it for today. Audience, thank you for joining us. Next time, we will wrap up Dynasty of Evil with our favorite Star Wars guest, Matt.
Yes, we will. Now take a moment, rate the show on your favorite podcast platform that you're listening from, and share this episode with a book-loving friend. And we'll see you next time on SideQuest.